I want to say heartily welcome to this inaugural webinar for the IAHR Women Scholars Network. And I think it's really fantastic to see so many women scholars gathered here. My name is Jenny Berglund, and I am together with Johnston, one of the present coordinators. And I'd like to start with saying that we're trying to gather email addresses, names, and also countries in the chat, so that we could collect these for future correspondences. So it would be great if you could write name, email address, and country in the chat function. And we'll use the chat function also later on for questions and so on. And I'll say we have like a panel here who will be speaking today. So I'll say something about the people who are part of the panel, because we don't really see that in all these little squares where we and you are. So together with me as part of the panel is Satoko Fujiwara, who is General Secretary for the IAHR, Morny Joy and Rosalind Hackett, who are the founding mothers of the IAHR Women Scholars Network, and also Milda Ališauskienė and Allocco, who are the future coordinators of the Women Scholars Network. And you will hear more from each of them in a short while. I thought I'd just say some very short words about the Women Scholars Network before I hand over to Morny and Rosalind, for those of you who have not come across it before. It was founded in 2006 to provide a forum for women in the study of religions throughout the world, so that they could be in contact with one another, and also to encourage scholarly exchange as well as friendship that have begun in various IAHR conferences in different countries and different regions all over the world. There is quite a new website that has been launched recently. And at this web site, there is a resource page. There is a place where participants can share conference photos and reports. And there are also links to associations and networks. So I would really like you to, I would really recommend to visit this website. And I think this is also something that we will develop from now on to put more resources on. There you can also find an email list and then announcements regarding upcoming conferences, in addition to sometimes research grants and so on. Apart from this, there is also a Facebook group that at the moment, when I checked, I think 2 hours ago, there were 562 members. And in this Facebook group, there is also quite a lot of information shared. Conferences, publications, positions, and so on, so that we share with each other. So you are welcome to share there as well. I think up until now, much of the activity of this research network has been focused on meetings at conferences that in one way or the other are related to the IAHR. We had a very large meeting for the Women Scholars Network at the World Congress in Erfurt 5 years ago, but there has also been meetings at regional conferences in different parts of the world. As you know, the IAHR World Congress was to take place in Otago, New Zealand a month ago, or nearly a month ago. And we had several planned activities for this Congress, but as we all know, this conference, as well as many others, had to be cancelled due to the global pandemic situation that we're living through right now. And this is, of course, very sad that we have not been able to meet in real at this Congress, but I think we should also think about the positive things coming out now, that these webinars are one of these things that has come out of this cancellation. And webinars cannot replace conferences and real meetings, but they do have several benefits since they are free of charge and they are easy accessible. And I think that this can really be something new in terms of the Women Scholars Network. And as we said, one of the challenges is, of course, the time difference. And I know that the future coordinators have been planning to shift time zones and so on for the webinars. And as we experience today, we also had, just to, what does GMT mean? And we've been logging into different times, but I'm really glad to see that we are 26 participants now at this time zones anyhow. Okay, so this was like a short introduction, and I now want to give the word to Rosalind Hackett and Morny Joy, who will tell you more about the origins of the Women Scholars Network, but also their role in it.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny, and gives me great joy to see so many friends and colleagues in front of me, albeit virtually, but I think the goal of this meeting and of this new phase is to see how we can improve on, strengthen our network and take advantage of new technologies and new forms of communication. That said, Morny and I are actually going to go back in time. We're going to talk about how this all started and some of the landmark dates where we really had significant meetings and gatherings. So, all right. So as you heard, Jenny said the World Women's Scholars Network was officially launched in 2006 in Bremen. But what Morny and I were reminiscing yesterday, and we would actually put the landmark date at the Rome Congress in 1990. Is that right, Morny?
Yes, 1990. Yes.
You're right. So why was that such a landmark date? Well, it was a landmark date because Ursula King, many of you know, she fought with the Congress organizers to have a panel on gender and religion. She met with some opposition, shall we say, and she, she's written about this. She was very vocal about it at the Congress, but she succeeded, and we had a 3-day panel, about 19 women. Is that right? And 13 of those actually contributed chapters to a book that Ursula King put together called Religion and Gender. So some of you may know that book well. And incidentally, as part of the planning for this webinar, Morny and I have not just been going back over the key dates, but we're also looking at some of the key publications that emerged in on gender and religion, or women scholars in relation to the IAHR. We want to create a record of women's participation and panels and publications. So that's something that I think will be a plus that comes out of the minus. So Morny, do you want to reminisce a little bit about that 1990, that wonderful Congress in Rome, but what happened to us as women in terms of where we were put?
Right, yes. Well, I remember that very well, because we had to walk quite a way across to the outskirts of the university where we were having the rooms that had then been allotted to us. but we had a wonderful time. And I think, I'm not sure how many people were there. Do you know, Rosalind?
Well, we know that there were 19 people on the program for the panels. Other people participating, including some men. So that's what I've gathered from Ursula's account of this in the book. No, it was memorable. I mean, the solidarity there was incredible, and bonds were created that exist to this day. We could say that there was an attempt to create a panel in 1985 in Sydney, and this probably should also, we have to confirm this. Morny, would you say something about what you know about attempts to set up a panel for women at the IAHR?
Right. We need to get this affirmed, though, and I'd like, to see some of my Australian friends and chat about it. But in those early days, there was a woman in Australia called Penny McGee, who had studied in England for her MA with Ninian Smart, and then came back and started a women's collective, shall we say, in Australia. And a bit like in Rome, there was problems about getting on the program and things like that. Now, what came to I could not go to Sydney, even though it was my hometown, because I was at that stage, almost penniless graduate student finishing off my PhD. But when I, heard of this story, it seemed to say, and this could not, we have to double check with Ursula, that Penny had got together a group of women in Australia for a panel. And she went and submitted it to the powers that be, so it would be on the program. And then on the opening day, when she went to look, or whenever it was that she got to look at the program, that panel was not there anymore. And Ursula we'll have to talk to about this too, to corroborate it, because that was the story that Ursula, the same way as she would then do at the next conference in Rome, just went to headquarters and let them know what, in no uncertain terms, what the problem was, and that please, could we have our slot back? And obviously it was on the program. But these were the early days, when the women were not being really supported. And so it's coming out of that, I think, for Rosalind and I, that we decided we had to put a group of women together and, and let it expand. And that's sort of how it all started.
Right. 5 years later, though, 1995, at Mexico City, as if you like, a type of backlash against what happened in Rome, Sylvia Marcos and I worked extremely hard to make sure that, because she, of course, was on the planning committee, that there would be a presence of women and panels that related to gender issues. So we went from struggling to get one, and we had 8 panels on gender and religion that Sylvia Marcos and I organized in Mexico City. And there's a short report on that in the journal Religion 1998. Then we get to the Durban Congress in 2000 in South Africa, where we had 6 panels with gender and religion theme, but one keynote speaker, an Indian woman, and Madhu Kishwa, and a plenary panel. So that was progress. And then, but things really started to change in 2005 in Tokyo. Why? In part because, I mean, it's not as if there weren't other forces, but, Morny and I were reminiscing. That's the year that I became IAHR president. the second woman to become president after Anne-Marie Schimmel, who was president from 1980 to 1990, I believe. And Morny was also elected to the IAHR executive. So, so that's where we could now have some influence. So I don't know if Satoko and other Japanese colleagues want to say something about you know, what you did to try to make sure that there were women scholars present and active at the Tokyo Congress. Satoko, do you have memories of that?
Well, whether, Noriko, do you remember? Did you organize some panels on women scholars?
No, but I'm just wondering, you know, you Japanese women scholars, whether you did anything from your side to make sure that there were women, Japanese women scholars had a place at the table in Tokyo.
Yes, I think so, but of course that's not enough. Yeah,
right.
There are many women participants there, but
right. Yeah, that's true. Well, anyway, so then we go to, there was also Toronto, 2010. We can't remember so much about that. Let's just jump to 2015. No, I mean, I was organizing other types of panels there. I wasn't so much centered on the gender panels. But then Erfurt 2015 was a really high point where we celebrated the work of Ursula, Sylvia, and I see that Eileen Barker has joined us. Eileen, were you in that meeting where we had 70 plus women for the business meeting and the celebration of the IHR Women Scholars Network? I wonder, Eileen, whether you were there at that meeting, because if you were, we would have.
I remember sitting next to Eileen.
What? Pardon? No, Eileen, you were in Erfurt, right? 2015.
Yes, yes.
Sorry,
did you?
No, that's all right. We could hear you.
I was.
Yes, and
yeah, it was enormous.
Right, because I really want to celebrate Eileen Barker's participation over the years in IHR congresses, but also as just a force for strong scholarship and sort of being a leading light for many of us. So we also celebrated Ursula King and Sylvia Marcos. So we do have plenty of photos of that. One thing that we were lamenting, and this is a sort of a call out to the new leaders and all of you, you know, we just don't have the evidence, the photographic evidence of the earlier events, because we didn't have cell phones then, and we didn't have, you know, small cameras. So we just realized that a lot of it didn't really get recorded. We would have loved to have a photographic record. Anyway, so just to also bring it up to date, for the IHR World Congress in Otago, as Jenny said, was cancelled, we had planned a symposium and celebration which was to be entitled Founding Mothers and Women of Influence in the Study of Religions, Past, Present, and Future. So we're still looking to how several of you who committed to participating in this, it was going to be a kind of multimedia event with publications and video capture and all of this. We hope that we can salvage some of this so that we don't wait 5 years to the next time. So Morny, do you want to say something about also how we were influenced by the regional meetings, and there are several people here whom we know mainly from regional
meetings.
Yes, yes. What happened when we had Women Scholars Network meetings, you know, how this also motivated us to try to lift our network to a higher level.
Well, yes, but it was, as we were talking about, a place where women's business was conducted. You know, what was going on, what we wanted to know more about, or how could we change things in different ways and things like that. And often as not, we were in very different, shall we say, the countries were different in their ways of how they were doing these sorts of things. And it was always a wonderful, shall we say, experience to meet these women and see how they were doing in ways that often were quite different from us. But we came together as a group and had wonderful times together. And I remember that the very first time I went to Indonesia, and that was for a conference on religious harmony. And it was Michael Pye was one of the organizers to put that together, right? And it was just a wonderful conference. And we had lovely music and lovely food. And, you know, it was just almost like a dream to be in this very different culture, but wonderful. And going to the beautiful temple at Borobudur and all of those sorts of things. There was, you know, very well organized to show us the richness of their culture.
But we also found out each time that many women in these different academic contexts lacked mentorship, lacked support, lacked resources, and one of the outcomes of our connecting was to build research relationships to help graduate students, and some of those have lasted. I mean, Amy probably could speak to that in terms of her neck of the woods, but the one that we had last year in Bangladesh was exemplified that, you know, women wanting to study religion but not always knowing how to do it, or thinking that they would be recognized for doing that. So we, you know, each of those meetings, and I remember many in Africa, in Western Kenya, for example, in 2012, where there were enthusiastic religious studies undergraduates who wanted to know how to go on and do graduate, postgraduate work. So, I mean, all sorts of interesting happenings, but also outcomes and positive results that occurred as a result of these regional meetings. So we're probably running out of time a bit here. Does anyone have any questions for us, or anyone want to chip in with memories of the early days? I mean, when we launched it in 2006 in Bremen at the European Association for the Study of Religion, it was a full house in an amphitheater. I think I see I see a Kim on the call. Kim, do you remember, you were there? Is there anyone here who remembers that launch of the Women Scholars Network?
Yes, I was there, actually. Yes, and it was a very, very lively meeting. I remember that. And as you said, it was full house. And also different voices coming up on what was needed. And I think that that was a European association, but we could still see that coming from different countries and so on, there were different needs.
Right. So, yes, I mean, we really need to somehow document what we've done and also what we do going forward. I think now with the new IHR website, there's great potential there, and how we can use social media more, Twitter, and all of that. So anyway, so that's you know, that's what Morny and I think have to share about how it all came about, and also look forward to hearing more how things continue to evolve.
Okay, thank you so much, Morny and Rosalind, for this, and we'll come back to these questions more later on. Satoko,
sure.
would you like
Yes.
to say something about your role in the IAHR and so on?
Oh, my role in the IAHR? Well, thank you for asking. Well, the job of Secretary General, according to the official document, it said Secretary General of the IAHR coordinates the work with other executive committee officers, effectuates policy, updates rules and regulations in the IAHR handbook and the website, fills out applications, write reports, write bulletins, and publish the e-bulletins with the treasurer, plans meetings and agendas, monitors movement and IAHR book series appointments, and maintains the daily correspondence with the IAHR. The Secretary General also maintains the membership address list and membership database, makes proactive efforts to secure up-to-date addresses by contacting those affiliates whose addresses are faulty and incomplete. The Secretary General also maintains the IAHR website, keeps it up to date, coordinates and monitors the web version of the membership database, and more. So in short, that's a lot.
Yes.
But a woman can do this too. But I'm the first woman Secretary General in the entire history of the IAHR. Every Secretary General before me was a man. See? So together we'll make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Satoko, for this. And well, you are doing so many parts of the IAHR. I think that's really impressive.
Thank you.
And now also in terms of the website, as you said, that the new launch of the website, which is important.
And
I say, yeah.
So I'd like to ask you, whenever you have a question or suggestion about IAHR that is not directly related to the Women's Schedule Network, then please email me. Then I will reply. I will respond as soon as I can. So I will appreciate any input from you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really important, I think, and great. I'll say something about my own role. So I'm professor at Stockholm University, and since January this year, I'm also General Secretary for the European Association for the Study of Religions. And as I mentioned, I came across the Women's Scholars Network for the first time at the IAHR conference in 2006, and it was a very lively meeting. And in 2015, I took over the coordinating role together with Johnston. And over the years, we've had meetings at regional and also, for my part, the European Association, but also at the American Academy of Religion, where we had a Women's Scholars Network meeting. And we also started to discuss this mentoring program idea that Rosalind mentioned as well. And I think that we've had many discussions in different ways, but it has been very focused on the actual meetings at conferences. And I think that we are really in a new stage now, as Rosalind said, where we are where we can meet in this way. And we are all used to meeting in this way now, which we were not at all a year ago in the same way. Even, of course, we've been having Skype meetings and so on, but not at all as this is how we meet. So I think that this is really an opportunity to move forward in this way. I know that Jay also has sent some words. Satoko, will you read them, or the email from Jay? Yeah, here is Jay's welcome statement. Jay is in a very different time zone, so she's not participating live, so to speak, but she sends her greeting here. Will you read it, Satoko? Do you want me to do it? I can't hear you.
Yes. Sorry, I just muted myself.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that this short greeting can be read on my behalf as an inaugural Women's Scholars Network webinar. My thanks to Allocco for making this possible. I commend with paying my respects to the traditional owners and custodians of the beautiful land upon which I live, the Wodi people of the Darawal Nation, a land that was never ceded. As you commence the webinar, it will return midnight here under the Southern Cross. Please accept my apologies for being unable to be with you live. It has been my great honor to be involved with the Women's Scholars Network, particularly to work with Jenny Berglund, to whom I send my thanks, my great thanks. My very best wishes to Milda Ališauskienė and Amy Allocco as they commence as Women's Scholars Network coordinators. No doubt they will build a brilliant future for the Women's Scholars Network. The collective support, encouragement, and engagement integral to the Women's Scholars Network remains as crucial and beneficial to women's scholars as it did in 2006 when the Women's Scholars Network was founded by Morny Joy and Rosalind Hackett. May that collective goodwill continue and inform vibrant discussion today and the future. So thank you, Jenny. Jay, Johnston.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jay. And I think it's actually time now for handing over the coordinatorship to Amy and Milda. And we thought that, you know, we are scholars of the study of religion, so we need a little ritual in this handing over business. So, and I mean, so this is like that. This is the coordinating role for the Women's Scholars Network. So by this ritual, I actually hand it over to you two.
Great.
Okay, so Milda and Amy, your turn to take over and present yourself.
Thank you, Jenny, so much. Well, it's really an honor and a big pleasure to be invited to become coordinators for Women's Scholars Network and to be together with Amy in this role. So I would like to start with my own introduction. And I'm sociologist of religion from Lithuania. I teach at Vytautas Magnus University. My main research interests are new religions, religion and politics, and religion and gender. And I'm looking forward to this next 5 years being here at this network and seeing all of you. I hope that in the near future we will have also an ordinary meetings again, but I think we also have a nice opportunity in the near future to use these technologies to see each other more frequently than we used to be seeing each other. So Amy, maybe you now join me.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and also Allocco and Rosalind and Morny. It is a great honor, especially because these are women scholars who I admire so much, and I count Milda among them, and I'm very pleased to take over this role in partnership and in collaboration with her. I first attended a WSN meeting at the Bhutan meeting, which was in 2011. That was the IAHR regional conference in Bhutan. And I remember at that time feeling like I had, happened into a wonderful network of scholars working primarily in South and Southeast Asia. And those connections and that network has remained important to me in the successive years. And those are enduring relationships. And I look forward to forming them and establishing them with many of you who are here today. I'm an ethnographer. I teach at Elon University in North Carolina here in the United States. And my work is in South India, in Tamil-speaking South India, where I've been working now for about 25 years. So I work on gender and religion primarily, especially ritual and goddess practices. and I have enduring relationships in one part of India, which are really around women's practices and gender and religion. I do attend the AAR as my primary meeting, and we have had some WSN activity there, and I hope that we will be able to expand that. I occasionally attend the IAHR and certainly the World Congresses, but my other primary meeting is that regional IAHR. I chaired for 5 years the International Connections Committee of the AAR, and I hope that we will be able to collaborate and tie up more strategically with the AAR in the next 5 years. But my passion at Elon, besides my own teaching and disciplinary research, has really been around mentoring in the last 5 years. So I have led for the last 4 years a community of practice around mentoring, and especially mentoring in religious studies and interreligious studies. So I direct a program for undergraduate scholars who do a 2-year faculty mentored research project around religion and society. And the mentoring component is something that I have been working on and now publishing and presenting on. And Milda and I have high hopes for what we can achieve together in the next 5 years. And we'll need your input in order to determine what are the components of mentoring in your different global locations, in your different stages of your careers that make the most sense. So we'll be asking you for some of that input in the chat and in the successive webinars that we are planning. And Satoko will in a few minutes be launching some very basic polls that we came up with in advance of today's webinar that will help to inform the shape and the scope of the future webinars that we have planned. So it's really lovely to be here with you all today. And I'm so glad that you were able to attend. If you haven't already, please do drop your email address in the chat, and we'll be in touch as we start to think about the future webinars coming up. And we'll say a bit more about that in a moment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. Satoko, you also have a letter from the president, Tim Jensen.
Oh, yes, may I read it? All right. Yeah, Tim is not here because he's traveling right now, but he sent me a message to read here. So, dear colleagues, dear participants to this first IAHR Women's Culture Network webinar. By the way, he also talks about history of Women's Culture Network. So please check whether his history coincides with our history, right? So in my 2010 report for the term 2005 to 2010, I reported, quote, how Professors Hackett and Joy had expressed an interest in establishing a network for women scholars, and how, after some years of preparatory work, the Women's Scholars Network was launched in 2007. He said 7. And, unquote. And I quoted from the aim of the Women's Scholars Network as spelled out on the website. Quote, this network has been founded to provide a forum for women in religious studies throughout the world to be in contact with one another. So the basic aim is to encourage scholarly exchange as well as to help solidify friendships that have begun at various IAHR conferences in different countries and regions. We hope to provide a venue for dialogue on topics of mutual academic and professional interest, unquote. I then in 2010 added that the network had already proved useful and attracted the interest of quite a few women scholars, and that it was, quote, the hope of the IAHR Executive Committee that the IAHR Women's Scholars Network will thrive and be an important help and resource to women scholars, unquote. Today, 10 years after that report, I want to thank everybody engaged in the Women's Scholars Network over the past 13 or so years. Founders, coordinators, and participants, you are all to be congratulated because the Women's Scholars Network has survived, thrived, and has proved to accomplish exactly what it was meant to. Particular thanks, of course, go to Professors Hackett and Professor Joy, serving the IAHR and the Women's Scholars Network, not just as founders, but also as the first peer coordinators. The two, but with them the many engaged scholars, have managed to make the Women's Scholars Network an institution within the IAHR, and the Women's Scholars Network has become a very important part of the work and strategy of the IAHR. Professor Hackett, starting her 20 years of service to the IAHR Executive Committee in Mexico City in 1995 as Deputy General Secretary, continued as Vice President for 1 term, and then served as President for 2 terms. Immediately upon her stepping down in 2015, had the honor of becoming an IAHR honorary life member bestowed upon her. Professor Joy, first serving as member at large on the Executive Committee, from 2010 to 2015 served as Publications Officer, and in that position helped establish the IAHR book series, which she has served right up to now in the capacity of a series editor. Professor Joy, as of this year, 2020, has had the honor of being an IAHR honorary life member bestowed upon her. As I've written in several other reports, the work of these 2 scholars of colleagues, including their contribution to the Women's Scholars Network, cannot be overestimated. And I thank the 2 from the bottom of my heart for the service to the IAHR and its Women's Scholars Network. I sure hope you will continue to serve the IAHR also as honorary life members. I also thank, of course, those who have had the courage to walk in the footsteps of Professors Hackett and Joy, that is, the now outgoing coordinators, Professor Berglund and Johnston, and I welcome and greet the incoming coordinators, Professor Ališauskienė and Allocco. Thank you for being willing to serve the IAHR in this highly important way. Rather than quoting myself once again on the achievement of the Women's Scholars Network, I want to quote from Professor Hackett's contribution to the Newman 60th anniversary volume. Professor Hackett having mentioned that the 1990s proved to be a pivotal moment for women in IAHR leadership, and that gender balance has finally been achieved on the IAHR executive, and having simultaneously referred to Professor Joy's important contribution, her paper titled Reflecting on Women and the Study of Religion in Newman, in the same Newman 60th anniversary volume. She writes that the World Women's Scholars Network has grown steadily, providing a much needed forum for women scholars. And she ends, today, in part thanks to the IAHR WSN Facebook group, women from all over the world are able to connect and celebrate their academic achievements. Hopefully, this webinar will be only the first of many, making it possible for for IAHR Women's Scholars Network women scholars to connect and share and celebrate the academic achievements despite the bad consequences of COVID-19 for the planned IAHR World Congress in Otago, and despite future possible consequences of COVID-19 and climate change for the future IAHR conferences. Allow me to finish by thanking the IAHR Secretary General, Professor Fujiwara, for her strong engagement arranging IAHR webinars and the one for the IAHR Women's Scholars Network included. I wish you all the very best and thank you all for your dedication to furthering the aims of the IAHR. Team Jensen. Jenny.
Okay, thank you very much, Satoko, for reading this message from Tim. And thank you, Tim, of course. I think we've come to the point when we're going to have a poll. So I think we come to the last part of this meeting, where there is time for questions, comments, suggestions for the future, and perhaps Milda and Amy also would like to say something about the future meetings and so on. Maybe you could start with that, Amy or Milda, and then we'll have the questions, comments after that.
So I think our current plan is that we would have one more webinar at the end of October and one more at the end of November. And then we would take a hiatus during the long holiday season and then return with a 4th one in later January. And Jenny and possibly Jay may be involved in those, but Milda and I will increasingly take on hosting duties along with Satoko. But of course, organizing the time zone is a major challenge, and thinking about, how do we shift it across times so that people in different parts of the world are able to attend live. We can see from our composition and certainly from the poll that this time favors certain locations. And this is a worldwide network, and we would love to enfranchise people in different global locations being able to attend live. So that may mean that we'll have to shift in different times, but we will always continue to record. And I think that Milda and I have discussed keeping the next one focused on a dialogue style format that brings in some of the important figures of the WSN from the past and the current period, and also starting to look toward more junior scholars so that we can get a sort of cross-section about the ways in which our research and our commitments and our teaching and our locations around gender and women's issues and sexuality and religion might be configured differently in those different stages, as well as those different locations. By the time we get to webinars 3 and 4, we would like to see more focused conversation crystallizing around what specific shape and scope should the mentoring initiative take over the next 5 years. So that is very particular to one's own location. Some people feel like they are poised to serve as mentors. Some people may feel like they still need different kinds of mentoring, but the specifics of that we would like to see generated by all of you. So some of you may feel like, because of constrained travel budgets or because of the pandemic and sheltering in place, that venues for sharing your research in informal, low stakes kinds of ways might be one way to network and contribute and also be mentored. You know, peer review of grant applications, helping to identify connections for potential Fulbright or other kinds of fellowship placements. These are some possible ideas, but these are just the beginning of the possible ideas that we might arrive at. So I think those are some of the things that are on our minds. So I'm seeing Katja is making a really important contribution in the chat. What else would you add, Milda?
Well, I would strongly also support the idea that Ludmila proposed with this, support for Belarusian women who oppose the undemocratic presidential election. And I believe we also, at least I have several times met scholars, women scholars from Belarus who were coming to IAHR and IAHR conferences. So I believe we at least maybe should try to reach out to them and see what kind of support maybe they also need from our side. So that we may do, but all the proposals are very welcome. So please share your ideas how we can work. I know that there was a letter from scholars for Belarus authorities, and many people have signed that, but as thinking about women position, of course, that would be a good idea to work it out. And we also, when we discussed with Amy our future activities, we also wanted you to indicate maybe at some point, write to us what women scholars would you like to see participating in these webinars, because we were thinking about this interview kind of dialogue type webinars, and maybe there are women scholars that you would like particularly to be seen in this type of webinar. So please let us know. With Amy, we would like to reach out to those people who are really interested for all of you. Amy, would you like to add something at this point?
I was just starting to type into the chat that these suggestions that we're seeing in the chat are excellent. And I would say also raising awareness outside of Europe in many cases is also really helpful. So and I know that not everyone's on Facebook, and the poll reveals that 70% are not using the Facebook site.
I've lost the sound like for the last 5-10 minutes. But
currently, that is our main way that we share information, because we don't have a separate email list for the WSN. We could start to build one using the email addresses that you have supplied if people don't object, because of obviously it would be another set of emails in your inbox. But sharing those initiatives that you're describing in the chat more broadly would help to alert us to the situation of women scholars and women in political contexts beyond our own immediate context, which we might not be entirely familiar with. So I think that would also be a useful initiative.
Yes, Amy and Milda, I'd like to suggest that we might have to be proactive in that regard in terms of identifying women colleagues who are working in locations and have worked hard for many years, particularly in Africa, for example. We don't have anyone from Africa on this call. You know, Europe is well represented, Asia's well represented, but Latin America, that would be important. Might be good to talk to Sylvia Marcos, who's spent her life fighting for space and for a voice for women and for women scholars. But I'd like to suggest Professor Oyeronke Olademo, who she's actually now a dean at the University of Ilorin, but I mean, she's a powerful voice and has worked hard to move up and and she's managed to publish in the area of gender and religion in Nigeria, and she's so I'm Kathy Wessinger knows her well, and some of you and maybe Eileen does too. I mean, she's a strong voice. It's a possibility to ask someone like her to speak about what African women have and still undergo in terms of recognition, appointments, research support. If that doesn't work out, there's also Bolaji Bateye at Obafemi Awolowo University in Nigeria. She's been to the AAR a few times. She's had received good support from the AAR. So I've worked with her for 30 years, so I know well her biography and how she's still struggling in her department despite her seniority and all of that. So that's just sort of a shout out for Africa.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosalind. And great that there is coming suggestions in the chat. Anyone else who would like to say something, comment, or I'll see if I can see everyone here looking. Okay. But I think that as both Amy and Milda said, I think we will also continue to email suggestions directly to them, and then we will have more information coming out. And then now we have this list. I mean, there are so many lists that we can use, but we can use the list, the emails of all of you attending, apart from the different regional and national lists that we use for information. So I think this has been a great meeting. I was a bit of confusion about the time in the beginning, but we managed, and I think we learned that in terms of time we will have to be a bit more specific, so that we can get everyone into the webinar. But I think we should congratulate ourselves to this successful webinar in that way. Thank you. Amy and Milda, maybe you want to say something in the end, or Satoko.
Oh yeah, picture, group picture. Jenny,
yes,
we can take group picture.
Yeah. I have.
Yeah, if you can, could you please where turn your video on, then I can just screenshot everyone here. And
yeah, maybe you can screenshot Satoko. I'll take a picture like with this one as well, if we can get as many pictures as possible.
Page.
Satoko, are you screenshotting or?
yeah, I just screenshotting.
Okay, good. I'll do like this.
Yeah.
And the second page. Don't forget to do the second page.
No,
my
course.
page shows everyone.
Oh, does it?
My page accommodates 49 people, so it's perfect.
Okay.
Oh, that's appropriate for the Secretary General.
That's great. So okay, and then you'll share the picture on the web page, I trust. Yeah.
Sure.
And Satoko also asked for information for the website. We should say that if there are other conferences and women's scholars meeting, is it you that we contact for the getting it onto the web page?
Oh yes, that's the easiest way. Yes, please do that.
Yeah. Okay, and it's
you
also
can find it on the website too. So it's easy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, and hope to see you all again at the end of October then.
Stay tuned for specifics about time and place.
Yeah.
Sorry.